But just to get started, I'm Becky Donaldson. I'm the State ESEA Coordinator and the State Title I Director. And we're looking forward to working with you this morning and working with you throughout the year. If you would go to your little Brady Bunch square, and you'll see there's a place where there's 3 dots. If you will go down to where it says rename and add in your LEA's name there, I think that will help all of us since we're in this virtual format with Zoom, so that we know which LEA you're representing. And the USBE people, if you would also add USBE to your name like I've done on my name here, that would be helpful for all of us. Thank you. So we've got Amy from St. George Academy, Michelle L. here from Provo District, Lisa from American Preparatory Academy, Bridget from Gateway Prep Academy, Early Light Academy, Anna Lynn is here, Brittany Powell from the Salt Lake Center for Science, I'm assuming that's what that is, Annalise Ruiz from Alpine, Sarah from American Leadership Academy, Lori Rasmussen's here from Weber District, Russell Carter from Beaver District, Lisa from Good Foundations Academy, I see Wendy here from Canyons today. Hi, Wendy. Phoebe's here representing Garfield. Elizabeth is here from Scholar Academy, and Tamala is here from Grand. Did I pronounce your name correct? Is it Tamala or Tamala? Tamala. Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. Dr. Bernardo VR from Davis District is with us. So this is great. So nice to see so many of you. April's here from Voyage Academy.
We probably need a computer.
Wait, Ben just joined us from Success Academy.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
And Heidi is new, joining us today from Davis District. And we have a number of our USBE staff here as well. Let's see, who have we missed? So we have Deborah. Deborah, which LEA are you from? I can't remember.
I'm from Salt Lake Arts Academy.
Oh, thank you. Great. Okay. Let's see. We have Christina from Venture Academy. If you would add to your name, put in the name of your LEA so we can all, that would help us all get acquainted. We have a lot of new Title I directors this year. I see Robin is here from Cache School District. So it's really great to see all of you. If you are new Title I director this year, would you turn on your camera for a minute and just kind of wave to us? I know we have quite a few new people this year. So Elizabeth, Phoebe, Wendy, Bridget, Amy, Dean Wilson from Terra Academy. Okay, so we've got some great new directors joining us, and we also have some of our experienced directors here too. which will be a really wonderful resource to you because they have been working in federal programs for a number of years and have a lot of knowledge, and they're always willing to share what they're doing that's working well. So Dr. Bernardo Villar from Davis, Michelle Eldridge from Provo, Annalise Ruiz from Alpine, Lisa Brunson from American Preparatory Academy. These are some of our Title I directors that we've been working with for a number of years. Lori Rasmussen from Weber and Robin from Cash. So I know if you were ever to call on them and ask questions and get ideas about what they're doing, they're always happy to share with you. So Tamala says she's not the director, but she was asked to attend. She's the Title I coordinator at her school, which is great. We love to have you joining us from your school as well, Tamala. I'm going to quickly introduce the USBE team that is here today. You're going to hear from several of them presenting. So I'm just going to start in the way I see you across my screen. So Tammy Long. Tammy, if you'll wave. Tammy's our fabulous Title I fiscal manager. We love working with Tammy. She's very knowledgeable, and we're so grateful to have Tammy on our team. We have Leslie Evans. She's one of our fabulous school improvement specialists in part of the new USBE Center for Continuous School Improvement under the direction of Tracy Vandeventer. Tracy could not be here today. She had a family event. Dr. Max Lang is another one of our great school improvement specialists. You'll be hearing from Max today. Val Murdoch is our Title I monitoring specialist. She does an amazing job in that arena. Dr. Christelle Estrada is our fantastic Title III director and such an amazing advocate for teachers and families and students. Marilee Wendell is our other fiscal manager. She works with a number of the other ESEA programs. Tammy does Title I and Title III, and Marilee does all of the rest of them. So we keep those two ladies very busy. Robert Palmer works with intergenerational poverty grants, partnerships for student success, and high quality after school programming, which are all funded through the state legislature. Dr. Chuck Foster's with us today. Dr. Foster is our American Indian and Alaskan Native education specialist, and he's such a wealth of knowledge, and he's always happy, and just whenever Chuck's in the room, I know it's going to be a happy day because he just radiates happiness and goodness wherever he goes. Becky Peters is our incredible right hand. She's our executive secretary for the ESEA programs, and you will hear from Becky throughout the year. A lot of times she'll send out resources or follow up on things. If you have questions, you can always reach out to Becky. She's very, very helpful. So did I miss anyone from our team? I think that's it. So again, thank you for joining, and we appreciate you being here today. And if you would please rename yourself and add your LEA name, that will really help us all as we get a little bit better acquainted. I've always been excited about the beginning of a new school year since I was a little girl and I went off to kindergarten at the Catholic convent in Helper. I just thought school was such a neat thing, and it was just my thing was to do school. So I was thinking about this morning as I was getting ready, and when I was in elementary school, and I think even into junior high, every year my mother would take me to the shoe store in Price, and I would get a shiny, bright new pair of saddle shoes. And so every year I had my new black and white saddle shoes. And I remember one year they came out with these really amazing tan shoes with the brown saddle. Oh, those were even better than the black and white ones. So I always had my new saddle shoes and bright and shiny, ready to head out the door to school. So I still have that same excitement every year at the beginning of a new school year. And it's been kind of a challenging 18 months due to the pandemic, and we're not finished with the pandemic yet. I think it's, you know, it still has its own designs on what it's going to do and how it's going to act, and just hoping that we can all be safe this year. So typically we love to meet with you in person, but for, you know, erring on the side of safety and health, we decided to hold the meetings this year over Zoom. I'm going to go ahead and begin. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll start the PowerPoint. Let's see. Let me go to the slideshow. So are you seeing the slideshow?
Yes, we
Yes.
are. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Christelle. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you about a waiver request that we have the opportunity to submit to the U.S. Department of Education. Given the continuing conditions around the COVID pandemic, recently the Department of Education sent an invitation to state education agencies to apply for a waiver of these two provisions in the Elementary Secondary Education Act. So the first waiver, those of you that are working with Title I Part A, there's a provision in the Title 1A law that indicates that if you don't use at least 85% of your last fiscal year's Title I allocation by September 30th, you can only carry over up to 15% into the new fiscal year. Once every 3 years, you have the opportunity to apply to the state for a waiver of that 15% carryover. So you might say, you know, we actually need to carry over 25% because we had this event that occurred. We weren't able to use all of our funding, but we have a plan to use it in the new fiscal year. So this waiver, if we get this waiver from the Department of Education, even if you have had a waiver of that 15% carryover limit in the past 3 years, we could grant another one to you for your 2021 Title I Part A funds that were the funds you received for last school year. Because very soon you will be receiving in Utah grants your fiscal year 2022 funds. So that would be the first part of the waiver. The second part of the waiver would extend all of the state fiscal year 2020 funds for all of the ESEA title programs for an additional year. Right now, those funds are all slated to expire on September 30th. So that's in about 6 weeks from now. If we got the waiver and you had Title I money, Title I school improvement, migrant education funds, neglected and delinquent funds, Title II funds, Title III, Title IV-A, Title IV-B, 5B, which is rural low-income schools, or McKinney-Vento homeless education funds that you are not able to fully expend by that September 30th, 2021 deadline, you could carry those funds through and they would not expire until September 30th of 2022. So earlier this week, we sent out a very, very brief Qualtrics survey. The link is right here in the slides. If you have not taken it, really literally less than 2 minutes to fill that out. It's just 2 questions. It just asks you about number 1 and number 2, and it's just yes to number 1 or no, yes or no to number 2, and submit. That's all it is. We cannot submit our waiver request to the Department of Education until we gather feedback from stakeholders. So that survey will close on Friday, next Friday. And then we have to gather that information and put it with our waiver request to the Department of Ed so that they know that we gave the public an opportunity to comment. So please fill out that waiver if you have not done so. Throughout the slide presentation today, you'll see reference made to that waiver. So we don't have the waiver now. So without it, keep in mind that all of your state fiscal year 2020 title funds for any of the programs listed here on this slide will expire this September. If we get the waiver, then you have that additional cushion of time. And if you have questions, please type those in the chat box and I'll ask Val or another member of our team to kind of monitor that, and we'll stop periodically and make sure that we address questions.
Becky, are you ready for a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Robin has a great question. Robin wants to know if we just submit one time on the Qualtrics survey or multiple times.
Just once.
Sorry, her actual question is for each program.
Oh, both questions are on that same survey. So you click yes or no.
I think she's asking, what about the Title I director? And if you have a separate Title III director and you have a separate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I asked all of the program specialists to send that same survey out to their program contacts. So they should have received that from those other program specialists. And they would also have that opportunity to fill it out. So yeah, thank you, Robin. Yeah, your LEA, you have multiple people that work with these various programs. They could all respond to the waiver. Thanks for your question. That's a really great question. Dr. VR, and I'm sorry, I can't see any of you or the chat while I'm presenting. So I appreciate Val for monitoring that. But as we joined this morning, Dr. VR from Davis District had a really good question as well. And that is the U.S. Department of Agriculture is the federal agency that oversees the child nutrition programs across the country. Those programs are not part of the Department of Education, they're part of the Department of Agriculture. And so due to the continuing pandemic, the Department of Agriculture is again they're providing the opportunity for all students to participate in free meals. So we know that last year it was very challenging for some school principals to collect the free and reduced lunch applications from families because families knew they were all going to get free lunch. They didn't feel a need to fill out the forms, and sometimes the principals, with everything going on at the beginning of last year with hybrid learning, remote learning, kids having to quarantine, staff members having to quarantine, various things, they were so busy and stressed, they just said, we're not going to bother even trying to collect it. So again, this year, you will need to somehow encourage families to fill out those forms or fill out some sort of a declaration indicating their, if they're from low income status, so that you will have data that will go on this year's October 1 count, because that will influence how your Title I allocations go out to schools in the next school year. The Department of Education indicated they were going to put together a fact sheet. I have not seen anything from them yet, but we know they're working on a fact sheet about that. And as soon as we get that, we will email that out to all of you. So moving on today.
Are you ready for another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Lori from Weber wants to know if the Title I Parent and Family Engagement 2020 grant would be included in the grants that they could request, that we could request a waiver for.
Yes, that money comes out of our school improvement Title I funding. So yes, that would also be extended. Thank you, Lori. That's a great question. And just so you're aware, many of you know Cheryl Ellsworth, who has worked at USB for a number of years and has been our family, parent, and community engagement specialist. She left our agency at the end of July and took another position in the private sector. So currently Cheryl's position is open. I believe that's going to be posted to the Utah job site. It hasn't come out yet, but when it does, we'll send that application your way. If you know of anyone that you think would be good applicants, we would encourage them to apply. Okay, I'm going to move on now, and then I'll stop periodically to take questions. So many of us have been involved in an initiative over the past couple of years with Dr. Nancy Fry and Dr. Tony Faddis, who are educators in California. And we've been learning about teacher clarity and assessment capable visible learners, which is all based on the research of Dr. John Hattie on what kinds of things can we implement that are really going to have a positive impact on students. So one of the things that we're doing is learning about learning intentions and success criteria. So Val and I have built some things into our sections of the slides today. So here's the learning intention that we have today, and that's to learn about what the purpose of Title I-A is, what are the components and what are the requirements, and how can the Title I-A program support equitable access to a high quality education for all of our students. These are the success criteria. So we hope that as we move through this presentation today, that you will understand what that statutory purpose and the goals of Title I-A. You'll understand the importance of plans, both at the LEA and school level. Understanding how to determine which schools within your LEA are eligible for Title I funding, and making decisions about how many of those eligible schools you might want to support with funds. There are two types of Title I programs, targeted assistance and school-wide. So we'll look at those two various programs and the requirements and components of those programs. And each of those types of school programs have specific qualifications for teachers and paraeducators. And then also in ESSA, when the ESEA under NCLB was reauthorized as the Every Student Success Act, Congress added a new component in there about the importance of basing decisions and implementing things that are based on evidence of things that really work. And so we'll talk about those evidence requirements a little bit today. So I always start each of these meetings, we go back and we review what the statutory purpose of the Title I program is, because I think it's so critical. It's the foundation of everything that we do in this program. And that is to ensure that all children have a significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high quality education, and to close educational achievement gaps. So that comes right out of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And it's critically important, as I said, to everything we do. It's the basis of annual plans. It's the basis of how we should be looking at the decisions that we make. Title I is the largest federally funded K-12 education program in the nation. And it was first signed into law as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. And President Lyndon B. Johnson signed that into law that year. Every few years, Congress has to reauthorize the law. And so it's been through multiple iterations. It's been, several different names it's gone under, but the previous name prior to ESSA was the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. And then it took Congress, 14, 15 years to get that reauthorized as the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. So it was signed into law by President Obama in December of 2015. The overall Title I law includes several parts. Title I Part A, which is improving basic programs operated by local education agencies. We'll be talking about that today. And Title I, Section 10003A, which is school improvement under the Every Student Succeeds Act. And Max and Leslie will spend time with you this morning talking about those provisions. There's also Title I Part C, which is education for children and youth whose families are engaged in migratory agriculture or fishing. And then Title I Part D serves youth who are neglected or delinquent. And many of those are students who are also involved in the youth in care programs, which have some state funding attached. But primarily today, we'll be talking about Title I Part A and Title I School Improvement. For fiscal year 22, we received approximately $87 million in Title I Part A funds. The Title I funds are always supplemental to the state and local funds that an LEA and a school receives, and that's primarily designed to provide supplemental services focused on meeting the needs of economically and educationally disadvantaged students. So we're looking at helping students achieve growth and proficiency on the state academic standards. Again, you know, the importance of closing achievement gaps between student groups, providing high quality ongoing job embedded professional learning opportunities for teachers and paraeducators and administrators. Parent, family, and community engagement is a critical piece of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And Val will talk to you a little bit more about that. And then providing a well-rounded education for all students. So not just looking at students who may be struggling and needing extra support, but also those high-performing students that need opportunities for, you know, advanced coursework, AP classes, IB classes, early college programs, gifted and talented programs for those students, so they have enrichment opportunities. Again, we're going to talk about the importance of evidence-based strategies. Schools that receive any Title I school improvement funding are required by the federal law to implement evidence-based practices. We're also trying to ensure that schools identified for state school turnaround are also doing that. Parent and family engagement is another part of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which requires LEAs and schools to implement strategies and practices that are evidence-based. A number of LEAs across the state for the past few years have had the opportunity with Cheryl Ellsworth to learn about the Parent Home Visit Project. That is an evidence-based program that originated in Sacramento, California, that we know really works to engage families, to make them feel like they're valued partners in their students' education. And we've had schools doing some remarkable work in that arena. Extended learning time options is another thing that Title I can help support. So before and after school programming, summer school programs, you know, special sessions that might occur on Saturdays, extending kindergarten programs to full day, or supporting preschool programs. So let's talk about what some of the requirements are for Title I. This slide is really important. It says the annual plan rules. And this applies at both the LEA level and the Title I school level. And the rule is you need to plan first based on needs. Then once you've identified needs, you built a plan to address those needs, then you apply your funding to support that plan. You don't just get money and say, oh, yay, I've got $350,000, yippee. How can I spend this money to buy shiny new things or, you know, pay for a new person? And we do see this happen sometimes. We'll have schools that will apply to become a school-wide program, and they'll submit their plan saying, we did a needs assessment. These are the needs we identified. Right? But then what they spend their money on has nothing to do with the needs. They develop a plan that's not related to those needs, and they put money into things that weren't needs that they identified. It was just they wanted to buy something, or they wanted to go to a conference, or they wanted to buy and pay for a salary for a person to do a certain thing, but it's not related to the needs that they identified. Okay, so you identify needs, then you plan to meet those needs, then you apply that money to meet the plan. And the plan determines, as you're spending those funds and you submit reimbursement requests, our fiscal people will be looking to see, is this something that was in your plan? Or is this just something you wanted to spend money on? And they may send something back and say, no, this is not really applicable to this grant. It's not in your plan. It's just something, it's just a way that you're spending the money. So please keep that in mind. It's critically important. Each year, your LEA Title I plan will be submitted through the Utah Grants Management System. Our team has been working with the Utah Grants team, and they're working with the vendor to make sure that application is ready to come out. We're hoping that it'll be available in September. We know they're working on it. We haven't heard a specific date when that will open. You'll be notified when it is open. And those are due November 1st. So that will be your plan and then your budget. Whenever you're working in these federal education programs, you need to make sure that you're providing opportunities for meaningful input from key stakeholders. So that includes teachers, administrators, parents who represent students that are served by Title I, paraeducators, special educators, and other support personnel, charter leaders, tribal leaders, if applicable. You may involve, some of your board members, but you need to have a wide variety of people that have the ability to help inform that plan. You're asked to coordinate that in the ESSA law, to coordinate it with the other title programs, with McKinney-Vento Homeless Education, IDEA, all of these other federal programs. If they are applicable in the schools that you're working with, you need to kind of coordinate how those programs will work together and support one another. So for example, if you're going to use Title I money to support professional learning, and you also are getting Title II funding to support professional learning, then how are you going to coordinate and braid those funds to really maximize the impact? So when you get that plan in the Utah grants, you'll notice that there are a number of questions you'll be asked to respond to. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but the bullet points, but you're going to have to describe how you're going to monitor students' progress. Okay, and how you're going to keep track of that. Here are several of the other plan provisions. One of the important ones is making sure that students in your Title I schools are not taught at a greater rate than students in non-Title I schools by teachers who are ineffective, inexperienced, or out of field. How are you balancing that in your LEA? What kind of poverty criteria is your LEA going to use to determine which schools you'll serve? You have to coordinate with some of these other programs, and how are you going to do your parent-family engagement, those kinds of things. Early childhood, how are you going to coordinate with preschool programs, or if students have attended Head Start or other kinds of early childhood programs? How will you coordinate to make sure that those children are successfully transitioned into the elementary school program? If you have schools that are operating a targeted assistance Title I school, and we'll get more into that a little bit later, you need to have a plan in place for how you're going to determine which of your students in that school are most in need of the supplemental services, and how you're going to provide them to those students. And again, if looking at transitions, how will you help students transition from elementary into middle junior high, from middle junior high into high school, and from high school to post-secondary? And then again, looking at overusing discipline practices that remove students from the classroom. So let's pause for just a minute. Are there questions that people have at this point in time, Val?
Yes, back when we were talking about waivers, Anna from Early Light Academy asked, low income status can still assist families with school fees, correct?
Yes.
And that's the only question.
Okay, thank you, Val. So let's talk a little bit about the parent engagement requirements. And Val is really great to provide a lot of extra resources to LEAs and schools about these requirements. Each LEA is required to have a parent engagement policy, and you need to involve parents in the development of that policy. Or if you've got a policy and you're going to be reviewing it to see if it needs to be updated again, you need to bring parents to the table so they have some input. If your LEA receives $500,000 or more in Title I funding in a given fiscal year, when you do your budget in Utah grants, you'll be required to set aside a minimum of 1% of your funds to support parent and family engagement. Schools also need to have a school parent engagement policy and also a school parent compact. And Val has wonderful examples of all of those that she can share, and they're posted on her website. There's an annual school level Title I meeting that's required where as parents are gathered together at the school, and this can be a virtual meeting, it could be a videoed meeting that's posted on the website, it could be a face-to-face meeting. But the principal needs to explain to parents that the school is a Title I school, that they're getting Title I funding, and how those funds are being used to support the education of the students there. Parents have a right to know certain things, and Val will go more in depth in that. As I said, parents need to have input into planning the kinds of engagement strategies that are meaningful to them. They need access to assessment and evaluation data. And then if a school is in school turnaround under the state law, or if they're in comprehensive support and improvement or targeted support and improvement under the Every Student Succeeds Act, parents have to be notified each year that the school is in that status. So there'd just be a brief letter that could go home explaining the school's in this status, we're working on a school improvement plan. These are the things we're working on. And put a positive spin on it that, the school's getting additional resources and support to improve the program for kids. So what is a Title I school? We get a lot of questions across the year, and a lot of time we get questions coming from external agencies or people from across the country or within the state of Utah that have programs that they want to send out to Title I schools or to support Title I students. So let's talk about what it means to be eligible for Title I. A school is eligible to receive Title I funds if they meet the following criteria. So first of all, the percent of students from low-income families has to be at least 35% or higher than the LEA's average percent of poverty. So that's the minimum. For charter schools, it's a little different. A charter school has to have a minimum of 10 students from low-income families. And those low-income students have to be at least 5% of the total school population. Okay, so schools that don't meet those criteria cannot receive Title I money. In Utah, LEAs typically identify their students from low-income families by using their October 1 data submission, which is submitted to USBE, which indicates which of the students are economically disadvantaged. When the Utah grants application opens, there will be a form in there that has that October 1 count for each school by the number of students from low-income families and the percentage of students from low-income families. LEAs have the option of editing that form. So I know in the past, one of our larger LEAs said, you know, by October 1, a lot of families have not yet returned their paperwork for free and reduced lunch programs, or their declaration, or whatever it is your schools are collecting. So that district prefers to look at their December 1 count, and they can edit that form that's pre-populated in Utah grants, and they edit that based on the district's December 1 counts. Okay, and we'll send out a lot more information as the application opens. We have step-by-step directions that will help lead you through some of that. Here's the important thing. There may be schools that meet those criteria at the beginning of this slide, but unless the LEA provides Title I money to that school, it is not a Title I school. I had a call just last week from some state auditors that were auditing a state program. And they called and they said, we're looking at the Title I school list that's posted on your website, and we're looking at the poverty for some of those schools. And there are schools that have 40% poverty. Why aren't they doing school-wide Title I programs? And they were quite upset. And I said, well, you have to understand, there's many schools in the state that are eligible for Title I. They are not Title I schools. They do not receive Title I money. And they said, okay, they were totally confused on that. And even sometimes I think school principals will say, well, I'm really a Title I school, but I'm not getting Title I money. No, they're not a Title I school unless they actually receive funding. So one of the things that you will be tasked with doing in that Utah grants application is ranking all of the schools in your LEA and then determining which schools you're going to serve with your Title I funds. So you will rank order your school from the highest poverty to the lowest poverty. And I said there will be pre-populated data in there from the October 1, 2020 data that you submitted to USBE. You have the option of editing it. If you have schools in your LEA that have 75% poverty or higher, you have to provide Title I funding to those schools. It doesn't matter if you say we want to focus our Title I money on elementary schools. If you have a middle or junior high or high school that has 75% poverty or higher, you have to provide Title I money to that school. Okay, so if you have any of those schools, you have to serve those schools first. Then you go back to that rank ordered list. And at that point in time, you can either say, you know what, in our district, we're going to focus our Title I money on our elementary schools. And we have a number of LEAs that choose to do that across the state. We'll say we really want to focus our money there. We hope that that will help get kids ready for middle school, junior high. So that's going to be a decision you will make. You can continue to provide Title I money to schools with a poverty rate that's at least 35% or above the LEA's average poverty rate, as long as you have sufficient funds to spread them out. You don't want to spread your funding out so thin that schools don't have, enough money to really do anything meaningful with it. So let's look at an example. This is up and coming school district, and the district has an average poverty rate of 41.3%, which is quite high for a district average. And we have some elementary schools listed here on the table. So you'll see here, Adams Elementary has 73.5% low income. 165 of their students are from low income families. So Adams Elementary doesn't meet that 75% threshold, but they're pretty high poverty. So the district says, okay, we're going to give that district $650 for each one of their students who are from low income families. So that determines that that school is going to get $107,250 in Title I. Then you've got Butler Elementary that has a little bit lower poverty rate. They have more students from low income families. They dropped the per pupil allocation a little bit by $50. And here, so that school is going to get $130,000. And then they go down to Cliffside, which is 53% poverty. And you can see how many low income students they have, what their per pupil allocation is for Title I, and how much their Title I allocation will be for the year. Drake Elementary and Everett Elementary are not receiving Title I money. They are not at 35% poverty, and they are both below the district average poverty. So the district cannot provide any Title I money to those two elementary schools. Let's look at another example. This is something we see too, and that is LEAs that you have to decide about. Are you going to be equal across all your Title I schools, or would you rather be equitable? So let's look at LEA number 1. This LEA said we're just going to divide the money equally. So every student from a low income family in our LEA is going to generate $1,000 per pupil. So you have school number 1 that has 90% poverty. They have 300 students from low income families. They're going to get $300,000 in Title I. But you have school number 7, their poverty rate is 40%. They have 400 students from low income families. They're still getting $1,000 per student. So they're actually getting $100,000 more than school number 1 that has more than twice as high a poverty rate. Okay, I would think that this school up here with 90% poverty is going to have greater needs than school number 7 does with 40% poverty. So I would prefer to be equitable, and I'm going to differentiate that per pupil allocation. So this is LEA number 2. School number 1 has 95% poverty, extremely high poverty, and 600 of their students are from low income families. This is a very high poverty school. So that school is going to get $1,000 per student, and they're getting a nice $600,000 in Title I money that they can really use to make a difference for kids. And you can see they've chosen their top 3 highest schools. School number 2 has 80% poverty. School number 3 has 75% poverty. So those schools are all in that high poverty category that have to receive Title I money. regardless of what the district does. So they're giving all three of those schools $1,000 per pupil for each of their students from low-income families. And then as they move down, they start to differentiate that per pupil allocation. So school number 4 and 5, they drop that per pupil allocation down a couple of $100s. And when they get down to school 6 and 7, they dropped it again a little bit. So they differentiated that a little bit more based on the needs of these schools and based on the level of poverty and the needs that those students would have. Do we have any questions at this point, Val?
Yes, I'm going to need Lori from Weber to clarify her question
Okay.
about private schools and equitable services.
So yes, so Becky, back to your, you were talking about schools are not eligible unless they have 10 students or 5% of their population.
Mm-hmm.
So and so they wouldn't be eligible for Title I funds. So I just wondered, is that consistent with when we are providing equitable services to private schools? Do they have to meet that threshold?
No, they don't. Equitable services is a different provision.
Okay.
So what happens there is for a private school, you determine students that would live within the boundaries of one of your Title I schools that are attending that private school. And if that student attending is from a low-income family, then they would help generate a per pupil allocation for that private school.
Okay, perfect.
If
Thank
they're
you.
not from a low-income family and they're within your district, but they're not within one of your Title I school boundaries. They're from one of your other schools that's not Title I, and they're going, those kids wouldn't generate a per pupil allocation. So
Perfect.
yeah, that works a little bit different. That's a great question, Lori. Thank you.
And then I went ahead and answered Tamila's question, but just to get it on the recording, Tamila asked, if we don't receive the $500,000, that $500,000, less than $500,000 in Title I funding, is there a required set aside for parent and family engagement?
No, the 1% minimum only applies to LEAs that get 500,000 or more. You do need to, you'd want to set aside money, but it doesn't have to be up to 1%.
And that's all the questions for now.
Okay, thank you, Val. All right, let's talk about the two different types of Title I school programs. Because sometimes we get confusion about these two different programs. If a school has at least 40% poverty, and it has to be that's the minimum. So it can't just be, well, the school's above the LEA's average, and the LEA's average maybe is 25%, or they're a charter school and their poverty rate is not 40%. They cannot operate a school-wide program. In a school-wide program, all the students are considered eligible for Title I services, even if they're not from a family who is a low-income family. But all the students attending that school would be eligible for any services that Title I provides. In schools that do not have 40% poverty, or in a school that does not want to operate a school-wide program, even if they do have 40% or more, it's a targeted assistance program. And in this case, the number of students from low-income families will determine what allocation an LEA, for example, if you're a charter LEA and you're just a single charter, your number of low-income students and percentage will determine how much Title I funding you get. But once that funding gets to the school has to identify students that are most academically at risk, and it does not matter what the family income level of that student is. So you could have the student that comes from the family in that school that's the highest socioeconomic status family in that school attendance area, but they are the most academically at-risk student, they would receive Title I services. But Title I services in a targeted assistance school cannot be applied across the board to all students. So in a targeted assistance program, if you hire a paraeducator with Title I funds in a targeted assistance program, that paraeducator can only provide supplemental services to those students you've identified as your most academically at risk. So they can't go in and just work with all of the students or push into a classroom and work with all of the kids in the classroom. If you're buying computers or iPads or devices, those devices can only be used to serve those kids you've identified as the most academically at risk. They can't just be used across your whole third grade or, that kind of thing. So you need to keep that in mind. It's very different. So let's talk about targeted assistance schools and what the requirements are. So again, any school with less than 40% poverty and any new school that comes in as a Title I school for the first year. Let's say you're a district, your district is growing and you're opening a new elementary school. And you know that that school is going to qualify for Title I. It's in a part of your district where, there's poverty in that community. But that first year as a Title I school, they have to operate a targeted assistance model. And again, the funding is only used for supplementary services for eligible students. So students who are eligible are those that are failing or most at risk of failing to achieve the academic standards. That includes any student that is experiencing homelessness. They are automatically eligible for Title I. You need to prioritize and serve those students. So you need to keep a list of students and say you have a list of 30 students and you say, well, we can really only adequately serve 20 students with the amount of funding that we have. So you will keep that list. You'll serve the students in the top 20 ranks of highest need. And then if a student improves, you think, oh, this student has made such amazing growth and improvement, that student can move out of these extra services. You'll move another student into that slot. So again, the funding is based on the number of students you have from low-income families, but the services in a targeted assistance school are based on student need. So again, students that are most at risk of failing, students that attended Head Start are automatically eligible. Students who participated in the migrant education program are automatically eligible. If you're serving students and they've been in a program for neglected and delinquent or youth in custody, they're automatically eligible for Title I. If you have students experiencing homelessness, they're automatically eligible. Students in foster care are eligible, and students with disabilities, even if they're already getting, they have an IEP and they're already getting services through special education. If that student with that IEP is one of your most at-risk students, they're also eligible for Title I. So you cannot eliminate them saying, oh, that student is already getting additional services from special ed. If they need those Title I services, they are eligible. So let's look at staffing requirements. So you need to make sure that you're establishing staffing patterns to meet the needs of those students. You want to make sure students are not being removed from Tier 1 core instruction to go out and do a Tier 2 intervention with a paraeducator. You need to make sure that a teacher is actively involved in assessing students and helping to plan those services. And we have a targeted assistance program checklist. There's not a plan, but there is a checklist of things that you will need to do. It's linked here in the slides, and it's on our website. So I also sent you the new revised draft of our Title I Program and Fiscal Handbook. I sent that yesterday. This is a wonderful document. It has a lot of information. It has links to forms that are on our website. It has links to guidance from the Department of Education. It has citations to the law. It's very, very helpful in providing additional information. So you can look in there as well to get a deeper dive into targeted assistance. A private school that you're going to serve through Equitable Services cannot operate a school-wide program. They can only operate a targeted assistance program. And a private school is never a Title I school. They don't receive Title I monies. The district provides services and the district keeps control of the funding. So a private school cannot refer to themselves as a Title I school. They're receiving services through Equitable Services provision, but they are not a Title I school. All right, let's look at staff qualifications. Every year we get a lot of questions from people about this. Any teachers in a targeted assistance school who are paid with the Title I funds must meet the state licensing requirements. And this next slide has a graphic from USBE's educator licensing section that shows you what those requirements are. Paraeducators working in a targeted assistance school who you are paying with Title I funds have to meet the requirements listed below. So they must have a high school diploma or an equivalent, plus one of these additional criteria. They either an associate's degree, 48 hours of college credit, a passing score on the Praxis Parapro exam. And Val sent out a survey last week, and she's in the process of exploring other options. We've been reaching out to our colleagues across the country and other state education agencies to see what other options might be available to help paraeducators meet that highly qualified requirement. So we'll keep you posted on that. So if you have paraeducators or teachers in a targeted assistance school and you're not paying them with Title I funds, then you may be able to get by without, like you could hire a paraeducator that just has maybe a high school diploma, but doesn't meet these other ones. But if they're paid with Title I, they have to meet the requirement. And we know in many of our LEAs, they require any parapro to meet that higher standard, which is really good. So this is the graphic from educator licensing. So it talks about the 3 new levels of educator licenses that were all revamped, you know, a couple of years ago. It tells you what the board rule is. It tells you about those 3 licenses, the 14 areas that are areas of concentration that would attach to a license, and then, you know, the endorsements that are available. So that's a really good resource for you. Do we have questions, Val, about targeted assistance schools?
Yes, I've been trying to answer them as they pop
Okay.
up, but let's go back. Anybody that's asked a question in the chat that feels like it did not get answered? I'm going to take that as a yes
Okay, so we're ready to move
or as a
on.
no. Yes.
All right, thank you, Val. So let's talk about school-wide Title I schools, because I think here the requirements again are going to be different. So again, there's that minimum 40% poverty threshold. We do have a form. Let's say you have a school in your LEA and they were 43% poverty last year, but this year maybe they're hovering at 39%. But you really feel like it's just a glitch in the data, and you really feel like, next year, maybe they're going to be back up into 40% or higher. You can apply for a 1-year poverty exemption. And we have a form that you can fill out for that. And all those forms are linked in that handbook. So if you look at the Schoolwide section in the handbook, you can find the link to those forms. If a school, as we said, any brand new school that starts out as a new school in Title I has to be targeted assistance. But if they have enough poverty and they want to move into a school-wide program the next year, they have to indicate to us that they want to plan to become, they have an intent to become a school-wide program. During the course of the school year, they're going to complete a needs assessment. They're going to involve stakeholders. They're going to develop strategies that they're going to implement to improve the entire school. And then they can submit after that, they've done all those things, and we will determine whether or not they're ready to become a school-wide program. But once you become a school-wide program, you have flexibility in how you use your Title I funds to improve the entire educational program for all of the students in the building. So all students are considered eligible. All teachers in the building, all paraeducators can benefit from professional learning opportunities. If you're purchasing computers or devices or software, those things can be used across the entire school program. We really encourage you to align your Title I school plan with, the other plans that you have, so that you don't have a Title I plan and a TSSA plan and a special ed plan and a trust, all those multiple plans. And USBE is working with the legislature to try to come up with a kind of a consolidated planning process. So there are some things in the works. So again, there's a section in our Title I handbook about school-wide. There's a link here and also in the handbook to the guidance from the U.S. Department of Education about school-wide programs. But in a school-wide program has to meet 4 components. Number 1, there's a needs assessment requirement, right? You do that needs assessment, you determine the needs, and then you're going to plan based on those needs, and then your funds are going to support those needs. You need to have some school-wide reform strategies that are going to improve the overall education for all of the students in the school. You also have to ensure that you're going to provide the extra support and enrichment that is needed for every student to get to mastery of the standards. And then you need to coordinate and integrate other funds. So your other federal funding streams, state funding streams, so that your Title I program is not sitting off in a silo saying, oh, this is Title I, but this over here is this. It's confusing to keep track of all that. And then, teachers aren't sure really where are we going? What's the direction we're going? That's a Title I thing we're doing, but we're doing this other thing for this other program over here. It's just too much to have on the plate. So those schools that are ready to submit a school-wide Title I plan will submit that to Val and I, and we'll review it and either approve it or provide some feedback if there are areas that need to be revised or updated a little bit. When monitoring visits occur, and Val will talk more about that when she does her section today, she will look at some of those plans and kind of a summary of those plans, and then talk to school principals about how they're using their Title I funds and what kinds of data they're examining and what kinds of success are they having with students. So staffing requirements. Okay, in a school-wide program, every teacher has to meet the state licensing requirements. Every teacher. It doesn't matter if you're paying them with Title I money or state money or special education money or whatever other funding stream you have, they have to meet those requirements. And again, we have that graphic on the next slide. Paraeducators must meet those requirements. So they have to have the high school or equivalent, diploma or equivalent, plus one of those other things. And in a school-wide school, any instructional paraeducator, and again, it doesn't matter how they are paid. If they have any involvement at all with instruction, they have to meet this requirement. And it's really unfortunate, but the requirement in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, all it says is, I think paraeducators only have to have a high school diploma. So a lot of times we'll have districts or schools say, well, this paraeducator is being paid with special education money. Why do they have to meet this requirement? Well, because your school is a school-wide Title I school, and they have to meet the higher standard. Doesn't matter what you're using to pay them. Let's look at, actually, I should have changed that to slide 33. Well, actually, it's a different slide than that. Here's that graphic, but here are some paraeducators that don't have to meet those extra requirements. They do have to have the diploma or the equivalent. But if you hire a paraprofessional and all that para is doing is strictly serving as a parent engagement liaison, they're not doing any sort of instructional activities with kids. They're working with parents in the community. All they're doing is providing translation services for parents, or they are providing personal care or other types of non-instructional care for students with disabilities, and that is all they're doing. Then all they have to have is the high school diploma or equivalent. But anytime they're involved in any sort of extra instruction, tier 2 interventions, tutoring, anything like that, they have to meet that higher standard. Here are some kinds of activities that, are typical things that paraeducators can do and that are allowable under Title I. So again, tutoring should not be occurring when students are getting tier 1 instruction from the classroom teacher. They can help with any of these other kinds of things as well. Val, do we have any questions about staffing or paraeducators at this point in time?
Going back to the school-wide schools that are targeted assistance that want to become school-wide, Wendy Canyon School District has a great question. Is there some state approved or state recommended entity or entities that can help a school complete their needs assessment as the school is moving from targeted assistance to school-wide model?
In the past, we did have a list of educators from across the state that had gone through a 2-day training in doing those needs assessment that LEAs could contact and work with. We no longer have that. Under school improvement, and this came about as part of the state school turnaround, there are some vendors that are on a state approved list that do that work in schools that are turnaround schools or schools identified as comprehensive support and improvement. Max and Leslie have that information. So if you're interested in contracting with one of those entities, Max and Leslie could assist you with that.
And that's the only question.
Okay. So looking a little bit at professional learning, your plan should discuss professional learning. So, that should be provided to teachers, paraeducators, parents, administrators, and it should be something that we know it's high quality, ongoing, job embedded. If you're going to engage in a professional learning initiative, like we have some Title I schools participating in our Teacher Clarity and Assessment Capable Learners initiative. We're wrapping up a cohort that started last year. We have a new cohort beginning this year. And we want to make sure teachers are getting some feedback and opportunities to engage in professional learning communities and support at the building level to make sure that they have what they need to implement those strategies. The state also has 8 professional learning standards that are actually in state code, and our next slide will look at that. And then in ESSA, professional learning activities are also required to meet evidence-based standards. And so we'll talk about that on an upcoming slide. So these are Utah's professional learning standards. These are on the Utah Educator Effectiveness website, on our USBE's website. There are 8 of these. And as I said, these are actually in state code. So again, we want to make sure that we're looking at these kinds of things. So we want to make sure that Tier 1 instruction is delivered by teachers who are qualified, they meet the state standards. We're doing informal and formal assessments to identify student needs, providing targeted interventions for students that need that additional help, and enrichment for students that you know, are high performing and need those other opportunities for additional enrichment. And then you should be annually reviewing your academic progress on your state assessments and, you know, other local assessments and informal assessments that you're doing, so that you're really looking at how can we increase the return on investment of our funding and really focus on the areas where we have the greatest need. So one of the new components that came out when the ESEA was reauthorized as ESSA was a focus on evidence-based education reform. Under NCLB, there was a lot of talk throughout that document. Hundreds of times it was referred to as research-based or scientifically based research. And across the nation, a lot of things really didn't change much. People just continued kind of doing what they'd been doing. And so a lot of opportunities for improvement didn't sometimes occur. So a couple of years ago, we had the opportunity at the National ESEA Conference to hear from Dr. Robert Slavin, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins University. And he actually established a website called Evidence for ESSA, where his team there at Johns Hopkins has vetted various programs and interventions and things like that, and indicates if they're evidence-based or not and what level of evidence they are. But what he talked about is we kind of get on these pendulum swings. I mean, this is my 42nd year in public education in the state of Utah. And as I think back across my career, I think back of all the different acronyms we had, and it's like, oh, we're implementing this thing. Oh, that wasn't so great. So 2 years later, we're doing this thing, and that really didn't get us where we wanted to be. So now we're doing this. And it was just this constant jumping from this thing to the next thing, no support for teachers, no coaching, no professional learning communities, no opportunities to network, to dive deep into subject areas and really learn. It was just like, we're looking for this silver bullet. And so we're jumping from here to here and back and forth, and things come back with a new name, and it's the same thing we'd already done, but somebody renamed it and making a bunch of money from it. So Dr. Slavin said that, you know, typically there have been some fields in our nation that really didn't really focus much on any sort of evidence. So one of those is fashion, right? Fashion just goes here and there. I mean, I had to laugh because I took my 12-year-old granddaughter shopping for school clothes. We do this every year. It's our special treat, and we take her to lunch. Every store that we went into looked at the junior clothes. They were all mom jeans. And I remember a few years ago, you know, if people were going to wear mom jeans, you know, nobody would be caught dead wearing mom jeans. But now it's the rage is the mom jeans, right? So I'm still waiting for my saddle shoes to come back. But of course, she's all into the Chuck Taylors. I've got to get my Chucks and my Vans and so I just had to laugh because it just kind of goes hither and yon, and it's, you never know what it's going to do. Art's another thing. It just sort of evolves, and we have these traditions in art, and then that tradition goes away and something new comes along that's very, very different. Well, education's sort of been in that same kind of situation for a long, long time. So what happened is we would hear from somebody, oh, I have a colleague that works in this other school in this district, and she said she did this thing, and oh, it was just fabulous. And so I went down and visited with her, and it was really cute. And so I'm going to try it in my classroom. Or it's just tradition, right? I have always done it this way, and I'm always going to do it this way, and I am not going to change. And we know that politics has a huge influence on what we do in education. Everything is political. So Dr. Slavin said, we've got to stop this. We've got to stop that pendulum and get off and start focusing on what really works. That is what really matters. So he said, we've really got to start looking at what medicine is doing, what agriculture is doing, what engineering is doing, all of these fields that are constantly learning, and then they move forward. So a medical treatment 10 years ago is probably not going to be the same medical treatment in many cases that you might get today for the same thing, because it's evolved, it's moved on, new discoveries have been made, new technologies are available. So there's that dynamic, progressive cycle of continuous improvement. And he said, that's where we need to be going. We need to be evaluating the needs of our students and then looking at proven interventions, strategies, practices, and programs. So this link right here will take you to the Department of Education's guidance document on using evidence to strengthen education investments. And this is something that I know our legislature is asking questions about all the time, is what was the return on investment of this state funding we gave the state for program A? Are we getting any results? What's happening in the field? Congress does the same thing. And if they think that a program is not working, they're not seeing the benefits, they're not seeing student improvement, then they're likely to say, you know what, we're not going to put billions of dollars in that anymore. We're not getting a return on investment. So this is what evidence-based in ESSA is. This is what it is. It's an activity, strategy, practice, intervention, or program that can demonstrate a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes. So the highest level is strong evidence. Those, of course, are experimental studies, which in education, we're not a field that has a lot of experimental research, because that means you have to, identify a group of students that are going to get an intervention, and then identify, a very similar group and say, well, this group will get the intervention. This group over here isn't going to have access to it. So there are some ethical issues that pop in there. So we don't have a lot of experimental studies. We do have some studies like that come out of university research study and programs. Level 2 are quasi-experimental studies where you have, you've done some things to control you have a control group it's based on, you're kind of equaling out your study groups, but they're getting the treatment. And then we have correlational evidence, which is level 3. And in education, we have a lot of correlational studies, right? Where it says, well, we implemented this thing and we got these results and we think it's correlated. You can't draw a direct line to it like you could with an experimental design or a quasi-experimental design, but there seems to be a relationship there. And you try to control for selection bias. So you try to make sure your groups are kind of balanced and equal. And then level 4, this is these are things that demonstrate a rationale. So there might be some research, but the research can't yet be defined as level 1, 2, or 3. But it seems like the data is indicating that this activity, strategy, practice, intervention, or program could likely improve a relevant student outcome. So if you are a school that's in improvement and you get school improvement money and you spend that money, you have to include things at level 1, 2, and 3. If you are doing parent engagement, you should be focusing on things in these top 3 levels. Right? So down here, you're still kind of collecting data. It looks like it's promising, but we can't really put it up into one of these categories. So in the handbook, there's a section on evidence. You'll see this chart, and then I have links to a number of websites that have been put together by good organizations like the Johns Hopkins Evidence for ESSA website and the What Works Clearinghouse that is part of the Department of Education's research branch. And so there's some websites there that have some good things you can look at and try to determine if something you're looking at meets some of those levels of evidence. So we really want to make sure that as we're thinking about those evidence requirements, it's not just checking a box to say, okay, I just want to be in compliance. They said I had to do it, so I'm just going to pick something off the shelf that was listed on a website, and I'm just going to say I did it because I want to check the compliance box. But that's not the question we need to be asking. The real question is, how can we use that evidence to help us improve our student outcomes, right? So it's looking at it with the right lens. Here are some links. This first link will take you to our website where we have a lot of information about the ESEA programs and also programs like intergenerational poverty that Robert Palmer works with. You have the latest version of our Title I program and fiscal handbook. We have an editor. She went through and edited the document, but she wants to do some tweaking to some of the formatting. So we have an older version on the website. I would ask you to use the version we sent out, but she's going to get that one fixed up, and then we'll take the draft watermark out and post it again, and we'll send that out when we have the final revised updated edition. But that is such a good guide. It's so important. It has such great information in there. There's a one-page document that gives you kind of a side-by-side comparison of targeted assistance and school-wide program requirements. Val created a wonderful intent to plan a school-wide program. So if you're a school that meets that 40% poverty, but you've been targeted assistance, or you're a new school, you have a new school that has to be targeted assistance the first year, but you want to move into a school-wide program, you can fill out this form, submit it. Val and I can provide you with feedback and technical assistance as you work through the pieces of that. And then when you get all of those things done, you can fill out this application to operate a school-wide program and submit that. And we'll, like I said, we'll either review it and approve it or go back to you and say, this part's really great. We need a little more information here. Targeted assistance checklist is also posted there. Val, any questions at this point?
Not unless someone wants to ask one out loud.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on because we're just a little bit behind schedule. So here are some dates to keep in mind. These were also posted on your agenda. We met as a team and decided that given the fluctuations with the COVID virus this year, and because we've had really, it's been easier for people to engage over Zoom because We have people that don't have to travel in from rural districts. You're not fighting rush hour traffic to get to our office. If we have a meeting and there's a terrible snowstorm, we're not worried about, oh no, people aren't going to be able to get here. So we're going to do our meetings this year over Zoom. The National ESEA Conference this year is going to be a hybrid event. You can register to either go in person to New Orleans, or you can choose to do the hybrid event that will be offered virtually. So that's always a great conference. So that kind of wraps up my section. And I am going to turn the time now. I'm going to ask Becky Peters if she will make Max and Leslie co-hosts, and we'll turn the time over to them for school improvement.
Hello, everyone. I don't see that I have control of the slides yet, but
Yeah, let me stop sharing, Leslie.
Okay.
There you go.
it's not letting me share yet. In the interest of time, do you want to advance my slide? Oh, here we go.
There we go. Does that do it?
I think so. Well, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry, Leslie, it's not letting me make you a co-host.
Okay. That's okay. Do you have control? Could you project, Becky, and advance the slide?
Yeah, I can go ahead and project again.
Okay.
Let me.
So I'm going to provide a brief update on items and some basic information for those of you who are new Title I directors about school improvement programs and funding under ESSA. And it starts on slide 46. Yep. And anyway, that's our contact information. Please reach out if you ever have questions. This first slide is just to give overall review of the different types of school improvement. So we have comprehensive support and improvement, often called CSI, where we identify the lowest 5% of Title I schools based on their overall performance for 3 years. In that category is also the low graduation rates. So it's schools. And then you can see there's school turnaround as well. The slide indicates that priority and focus are no longer used in the new reauthorization.
Am I on the right slide, Leslie?
Not quite. It's
I
okay.
don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, so go back to slide 48, which is different on my version. So
Yeah, this is slide 48 right here.
okay. So back to the school improvement header. Okay, and the next slide. That was just a reminder about the waiver that's extended those 19 funds. And so they are, yep, there we go. So here's an overview of all the different funds that are out for school improvement. Again, these are schools that have been identified, are well aware, are 3 years into the identification for CSI. And there are a number of grants out now. So 19 is due, needs to be spent by this September. The 20 T1 SF are the monies that Becky indicated we'll be asking for a waiver for, and hope they'll be extended until 22. That's where you fill out that survey to help Dr. Donaldson apply for that waiver. And then there is a 21 formula grant out, and those funds will expire in fall of 22. So again, for those identified, there are exit criteria. This next school year, CSI schools in for overall performance will have to be above the lowest performing 15% of Title I schools, and the CSI grad rate will have to be above 67% grad rate for the second and third year. And there's a brief graphic, I believe, on the next slide to show those. And again, this applies to a very narrow set of schools. You should know if you're identified. If there is any question, please let us know. Because we were able to collect grad rate data in 2021, these exit criteria do not change. So they'll be based on the school years listed in that timeline. Move on. And the next one, already went over that. So our state school turnaround and leadership development code, we've been entering and exiting cohorts of schools. Cohort 3 just barely presented to an exit panel, and all recommendations were approved by the State Board of Education in the August meeting. Cohort 4 has an updated exit criteria that we're pretty excited about because it highlights the school's ability to grow. So in the third or fourth year, cohort 4 will need to reduce the gap in their performance on the accountability system by a third to a letter B and exceed the lowest 5%. Again, very narrow criteria and for a very narrow set of schools. We only have 2 right now in cohort 4. So next slide. Thanks. So we're going to spend a little time talking about targeted support and improvement. TSI is what it's commonly called. We have 2 cohorts identified now, and what this identification category seeks to identify is those schools that have a student group in the below the lowest 5% of the overall performance of the lowest 5% of schools in the state's accountability system. So we have hundreds of schools right now identified in this TSI category, with the majority having been identified for their gap in performance for multilingual learners and for students with IEPs or special education students. There's some more informational slides. Next slide. About the exit timeline, and I predict there could be some questions here. So the first year we identified schools for this category TSI was in 1819, and then the pandemic happened. So we skipped 2 years, and you can see the 4-year cycle. So each TSI student group needs to be above the lowest 5% cut for 2 years consecutively within that 4-year period. I have one more graphic to show. So that's the timeline for the 18, that first cohort, and this is for the second. And so this attempts to explain how a school could exit or could not exit from TSI. So if you had a student group, your students with disabilities did not rise above that 5% cut the first year, did not rise above that 5% cut the second year, but did in years 3 and 4, they would exit in year 4. And I think I'll do one more example. So then in your multilingual or English language learner student group, this example, they would not exit because there were not 2 consecutive school years above the 5%. I will say we on the school improvement team are well aware of the complexities and need for information and support for these schools. So please continue to communicate, and we have an opportunity for those schools that have those LEAs that have schools identified for TSI. And this is it, a partnership with WestEd. They have a call system for reporting and assessment that we are delighted to offer to schools. Of course, with the lack of data, at least summative data. Hopefully you're keeping local formative data, but with the lack of summative data, we agreed that schools needed more avenues by which to get information to guide their targets for the upcoming school years. So we've partnered with CALL, and it's a school and district feedback system based on the 4 domains of rapid school improvement, which is the state board's adopted framework for school improvement. So the next slide will have some information or give you an example of a screenshot of a report that a school or a district could receive. You could see on the left, you have some made up schools. There is a Lincoln and a Washington, but this isn't real data, showing comparative scores from this survey and assessment system in the 4 domains. And the 4 domains are at the top: turnaround leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and culture shift. So hopefully you can see, and when you go to a link to look at the website that's been created, you'll see hopefully the power in this system to be able to compare and to see growth and to target areas of improvement. Next slide. Just another screenshot to show how an LEA may, or even a school may want to compare perspectives, from the teachers and how that might differ from the administrators or support staff. So I've gone over a few reasons why we think using WestEd CALL is could be helpful, but you could collect that qualitative data and have a quantity by which to decide your programming or your funding. We think it's useful while we have these gap years of no summative data, that's not a normal year. And then next slide. We have 370 school and 30 LEA licenses available. It's a big opportunity. That's fewer than the number of TSI schools we have identified now. So the licenses are limited. We are pushing this information out through the superintendency, but also at meetings like this for Title I, for special education, charter schools. We have some great partners in charter school that can help assist in this program as well. And we expect to begin distributing licenses by September, just coming up as soon as possible. I'm going to drop 2 links in the chat. One is a website where you can learn more. And another is the actual form to sign up. You do need to indicate if your superintendent supports this, knowing that charter schools have their own superintendent. Anyway, it just is a way to keep the contact as one person. So you'll be asked to identify a contact person, and here's that form link right here. I've been yammering on. Max, do you have anything to add?
Lindsay has a question just with regarding how long the process takes in using the CALL survey.
They do recommend a fall and a spring administration of the survey, and it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. We all did it, of course, to test it out and see what kinds of questions were available, and it's very applicable and useful, has been researched. I encourage you to check out the website for more information or reach out to one of us. That's all I had. Any questions about school improvement? Okay, thank you. I will stop sharing. Or no, you're sharing.
Yeah, I'm sharing. Thank you, Max and Leslie.
You're welcome. Oh, will school turnaround move forward this year, or is there still a pause? Yeah, we are not identifying new schools for turnaround. Those who have been identified, the 2 schools in cohort 4 will continue, but we won't identify another round until fall 23. I say that with worry because, okay, yes. You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Max and Leslie. It's great to have you here today, and they are so fabulous. And if you have questions, I mean, they are so willing to help you. So don't hesitate to call on one of them or both of them. And also William Evans and Marie Stephenson from our charter school staff are excellent supports. And I know William's here in our meeting today. We appreciate him being here today.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thank you, William. Okay, stuck. So before we move into Val's section, I think we're caught up now. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm going to propose that we take maybe a 10 or 15 minute break. So everybody has a chance to get up, move around, get a drink, get a snack. So let's take a break and we will be on tap with Val at 10:30. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. In just a few seconds, we'll have Val take us into the wonderful world of monitoring and technical assistance. Okay, take it away, Val.
Thank you, Becky. I'd like to start off the new Title I directors meeting with a graphic that may reflect what it might feel like when you're notified, hey, you have a monitoring visit for Title I this year. And this year's graphic has to do with the way that some people might feel they're under the magnifying glass, those converging rays of the sun, and they're like that leaf or the paper or even an ant. While I enjoyed and loved that science experiment as a kid, I'm hoping we get to the point where it doesn't feel like for LEAs that you're the leaf or the bug under that intense heat, but rather monitoring is an opportunity to show off how your school community and your LEA community has thoughtfully planned and is using its Title I funds to benefit students. The learning intention for this monitoring section has to do with the 3 R's of monitoring. And unlike reading, writing, and arithmetic, these actually start with R's. So responsibility is the one that we associate most with monitoring. Title I has a lot of regulations and probably more than any other program, just because it's the largest education program. So yes, responsibility is a big part. Relationships is something that we stress. I notice after we have an LEA and an SEA meeting and a monitoring visit that the calls and the emails go up from those LEAs who we visited with, because we've established that relationship. And with those that we already have that relationship with, we're hoping that the trust increases even more and that relationship deepens. The third is one that the R that you may not think about, but an opportunity to reflect on how you've been going about business. Is it the best way to be utilizing those funds? And hopefully it's the LEA that ends up holding the magnifying glass rather than us, and that you do some reflection. It is an opportunity to reflect on what you're doing and maybe what you would like to change. and continue doing. The next is the success criteria. And the first one is for those of you who are brand new. It's to distinguish between the desktop monitoring system and the Onsite, or this year, virtual monitoring system. The second success criteria is to identify the requirements that you at the LEA level and at the school levels can be working on now for Title I. And finally, determine which of all the supports that will be available will serve you best in completing this year's DMI. And I'll explain more about what the DMI is in just a second. As far as monitoring goes, there are main ways that we monitor. Every year, LEAs are required to complete a desktop monitoring process. It's much easier for the LEA, and it's much easier for us to review documentation and evidence and assurances that you understand what's expected each year. The Onsite is one where we visit with you. Prior to last year, it usually took place at the district office, in the school, at the charter. Last year, we did learn some things, and people had positive comments to say about the virtual monitoring visits. It cuts down the amount of time that you need to take away from your other responsibilities. Let's go into desktop. Becky talked about Utah grants already, and then I also want to add some information about Utah grants and then get into the desktop monitoring instrument, or the DMI. So just as a reminder, Utah grants is due November 1st, hopefully, fingers crossed. It will be the first time for Title I that we've been using it, if it is available and due on November 1st. Utah Grants has its own helpline. So if you are having problems accessing it, or if the personnel have changed, then you can contact Utah Grants for that, either through the email address or the phone number. Again, that's where the budget and your LEA Title I plan will go. The DMI is a little more very focused on ESEA and the requirements of Title I. I've tried to go through and update all the new Title I directors and other people that have been were indicated that they will be helping out with Title I this year. If for some reason you did not receive an invitation from me and you're new, would you drop your name and email in the chat, or email me directly with that information, and I'll make sure to add you. I noticed that Scholar Academy might have someone that needs to be added, so that would just be one example. If you're having trouble logging in, you already have that invitation. You can send an email to the dmi.helpdesk@schools.utah.gov, and that email will go directly to Renee Medina or Becky Peters, who both help out with the DMI. It is due a month later, but I'm going to invite you to start on it now because it's available now. And while you're waiting for Utah Grants application to become available, you can get this done. The support is available in multiple ways. I will post a recording on YouTube the first week in September. And then I will follow that up with some office hours the afternoon of the first Title I directors meeting, or second if you're considering this your first. Becky Peters will drop the link to the DMI in the chat, so you can try it out and make sure that you have access to that. As I mentioned, the DMI is open. If you would like to go ahead and start experimenting with that before the recording is available the first week of September, if you want to get started now, there are some resources already on our website, and Becky will drop the link to that page on our website in the chat, Thank you, Becky. That has last year's recording, which may or may not be helpful. At least it will show you how to get started. And then there's a PowerPoint that will also help you if you're a beginner with DMI. The DMI has two instruments, an annual core and a cycle instrument. The DMI doesn't change much, and they're kind of the big things that we look for every year. I've listed those that require an evidence upload just to familiarize you with things that you'll be expected to provide this year. The only new item is a family engagement reflection piece. Like Becky mentioned, there is in every LEA is required to have a family engagement policy. And in that policy, when you wrote it 3 or 4 years ago, everyone had to have a caveat that said, this policy and family engagement in general will be evaluated annually. And it's easy to lose track of those things when you've got so many other things that you need to be focused on. And so this reflection, it's not graded or anything, it's just an opportunity to honestly reflect on how you are evaluating family engagement at your LEA. We've always required Title I documentation of the meeting, the annual meeting. We had a training in the spring, and in that training, I let you know that starting this year in this annual core, your evidence needs to specifically show that each school, if you're a district LEA or if you're a single site charter, if you're a school, covered the required topics. And I think Becky Peters, if you would drop in the link to the tips and topics so that those of you who were not at that training can see what needs to be included in that documentation. As Becky mentioned, depending on your local decision-making and how you're approaching in-person meetings, this may be an in-person meeting, it may be a virtual meeting, it could be held in a social media live event. You could record that live event and then post that to the website so everyone has access to that. Another thing that you need to, if you're a district LEA with private schools, you need to document that you have contacted, reached out to private schools in multiple ways. And if any of them chose to consult with you about equitable services, you need to have a signed affirmation of consultation with each of those. And all this documentation is also in the resource tabs for their respective items in the DMI. The comparability report for those LEAs that have both Title I and non-Title I schools. If you have made any changes to your supplement, not supplant policy methodology, please include that. And then time and effort documentation for those paid with Title I funding needs to be, a blank copy. Tammy will go into more of this. So there's the annual core that you do every year, and then there's a cycle. We have 4 cycles. We're on cycle 2, and cycle 2 is new. Cycle 2 will go over all the parents' rights that fall under Title I. There are 2 items on cycle 2. One is the LEA responsibilities, and one is the school responsibilities. And you'll just summarize how your LEA and how each of your schools go about making sure that parents are aware of these rights. So for the LEA responsibilities, I'm going to go through this very quickly. Again, this is in the resource tab of the DMI. You need to notify parents that they have the right to request the qualifications of their child's teachers, and or if they receive instructional services by paraprofessionals, and if so, if the qualifications of those paraprofessionals. Usually we think of this as a school responsibility because it kind of makes more sense. So if you're at the LEA level, you can ask your schools to take that responsibility on. Another responsibility of the LEA is to notify parents that they have the right to request information on mandated assessments, as well as the right to opt out. You need to post the LEA school report and school report cards to your LEA website, and some may choose to post that to the school websites as well. That's best practice. Of course, if those data are available, evaluate your family engagement annually. Involve in developing, revising, and reviewing LEA family engagement policy. Districts may do that every year. The law says to do it regularly. And then if there are any parent complaints or dissatisfaction with your LEA plan, you need to include those when submitting the plan. You could do that via the Utah grants, or you could just email that to Becky or to myself. The school responsibilities: provide student achievement and growth data. Schools are great at doing this. Notify if a parent has been assigned to or taught for 4 or more consecutive weeks by an unqualified teacher or substitute. Provide timely information about Title I programs. This makes me think of targeted assistance programs where some students may move out because they're doing well. They may not need those targeted services anymore, and new students might be identified. So giving parents timely information about their qualifying for those services. This could also be how you go about providing timely information about the Title I annual program. Just going to check. Oh, it looks like Becky, you are holding down the chat for me. Please feel free to interrupt with any questions. Provide if requested. So again, some of these they have to request. Some of them you have to notify that they have the right to. But if they request an opportunity to participate in the decision-making with regard to the education of their child. Involve them in the planning review of Title I plan and the way Title I funds will be spent, unless you already have an SCC that is over that, or a Title I committee or a board. As long as that board or that committee is representative of all parents. And then just like the LEA needed to submit to the SEA any complaints about the plan, the school needs to include any unsatisfactory comments about the school-wide program to the LEA. So those last two only have to do with the school-wide program, not targeted assistance programs. Any questions on parents' rights in the DMI? It's a lot, but once you go through it, you'll have it done, and you'll know that you are meeting all those requirements. And then if you'll only need to update that with changes the next time cycle 2 comes around. What can you do now to get ready for this coming year? I laugh because you're in the middle of it, I know. Make sure that any evidence that you have reflects those requirements. There are 3 topics that are required. And then the 4th requirement is that it's a meeting that's created for all parents. An SCC meeting, while parents are free to attend, is not created for all parents. A charter board meeting, while parents are free to attend, is not created for all parents. So it really does need to be a school-wide meeting. Back to school nights and parent-teacher conferences, those are created for all families and parents. Make sure that your family engagement policy is posted somewhere, or if you still distribute them a paper form of that they're ready. School family engagement policy, the compact, addressing, do you have all those processes in place to notify parents of their rights, and a summary of your Title I program or plan. This is an example of a school in Provo City School District. Spring Creek Elementary has a page dedicated just to Title I. They answer what is Title I. They have a summary of what they present to families at their annual Title I meeting. Some will post the video of recording to their website. They have a link to their district website as well as contact information for their Title I coordinator. They have both English and Spanish versions of their Learning Compact. They call that the Learning Compact, School Family Compact, lots of different names for the same thing. Family engagement policy at the school level and additional resources. Notice they have the goals at a glance. They also have the school report card on there. Once you have a page dedicated to Title I or a section, it makes it so much easier to link to all these requirements that you're asked to do through Title I. In your newsletters, you can link to sections of the compact and say, hey, remember parents, this is part of the compact. You can link to the annual Title I meeting if anyone missed that, or if you have families join your school mid-year. So there are lots of ways, once you have that information posted to your website, that you can provide that information to families. Things to be addressed in the near future, not right away, would be the LEA report card, school report card, and then if the website has not been updated. So that was all desktop monitoring. That will be every single year. And then virtual monitoring visits happen for 3 different reasons. Monitoring visits happen for LEAs in their 2nd year of utilizing funds. Often this will be a new charter that started the previous year, and we just want to meet to make sure the questions are answered and that those funds are being utilized correctly, that the LEA is in compliance. It's very similar to the routine monitoring visits that happen every 5-ish years. We thought at one point we could just go right to risk-based monitoring, but what we find out is it's easy to forget in 4 or 5 years some of the details. And so it's nice to offer that reflection opportunity every 5-ish years. And then based on the risk assessment that LEAs complete and load to the Utah grants with their Title I application, we go through, or Tammy goes through, Marilee go through, and make sure that those scores are reflective of the actual risk. And then based on that risk, an LEA may qualify for a risk visit to ensure that they, if they're out of compliance, that they are able to get back into compliance. These are the lucky LEAs that have a monitoring visit this year. In the upper right-hand column, those are the 2nd year LEAs, 2nd year of receiving Title I funds, and then all the rest are just in their regular rotation. I have next to Salt Lake City School District, the Open Classroom, and Salt Lake Center for Science Education listed as well. So they are not alphabetically listed, but just next to Salt Lake School District, since I was limited on some space there. Lots of monitoring visits this year. Monitoring visits have 2 components, a programmatic portion of it, and that explores the ways that you are choosing to utilize the Title I funding. What strategies are you putting those funds toward? The personnel. So like Becky went into some detail about teachers who are at targeted assistance schools, who are part of that targeted assistance program, need to be state certified, and school-wide programs need to have all their teachers state certified. And I will also be asking for evidence of paraprofessionals being highly qualified. Again, targeted assistance, those are any paraprofessionals paid with Title I funds. And for school-wide, it's all paraprofessionals that are providing instructional services. Fiscal will be more of the policies and procedures, as well as reimbursements through Utah grants. And Tammy will go into more of that information. As Becky explained, it's that whole process of how do you decide how to spend those Title I funds? Is it just the shiny object, or is it based on a needs assessment? And in the case of targeted assistance programs, looking at what the needs of the students are and developing those criteria. Based on those needs identified, what is the plan that you've come up with? It can be the school improvement plan. It doesn't have to be a separate Title I plan, as long as the needs assessment and the plan address what it is that your Title I plan is going toward. And then what kind of outcomes, how are those funds being used to benefit students? All of that will be part of the programmatic, as well as the interviews. So we'll have an interview at the LEA level, an interview at the school level. And then if you're a charter LEA, the questions will be combined from the LEA and school administration interviews. The questions are very reflective in nature. They come in large part from the research done by Parrott and Budge on high-performing, high-poverty schools, by John Hattie's work in the high-impact practices. And so those questions will be sent out very soon to those who have monitoring visits scheduled. This information has been reviewed already, so I'll just pause here for a second. You're welcome to join this same call next year, as many of our experienced LEAs have done today. One of the fastest ways to get support is to call or email us. Our team is very good at getting back to you within the same day, and if we can, within the same hour. Okay, here's that third learning criteria. I would like you to identify, you don't have to do this in the chat, but identify which of the DMI supports are you most likely to access. The first one is to watch that training in September or later on, because it's not due until December 1st. Show up for those office hours. Call me, please, before December 1st, or access a combination of more than one of those. And there are many of you that will probably not need that kind of structured support. So we hope that monitoring does not seem like a situation where it's a got you or a burn. It's an opportunity to demonstrate that you are being responsible with those funds, that you are an opportunity to establish relationships, and most importantly, to engage in that reflection that will lead to those positive changes. Oh, good. You put it in the chat. Nice. I'll go back and review that. And those of you who did not have access to the DMI, I will go back through the chat during the next presentation and make sure that I get your name entered into the DMI so that you have access. And please don't hesitate to call us. Thank you. Becky, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share.
Thank you, Val. Val always does such a great job, and she's really, since she's been at our office, she has created a lot of great resources that are posted on the website. She always gathers fabulous examples from LEAs and schools as she does monitoring, and always has great information to share to make your life a little bit easier. So thank you, Val. We're going to move now to discussion of Title I fiscal issues. And so Our amazing Tammy Long will be doing that for us. We actually stole Tammy from another state agency a few years ago. We just poached her right out of there. And so we're so grateful we did, because she's just made such a difference at our office. And so Tammy, will turn the time to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tammy Long, and I'm the compliance manager for Title I programs and some of the other federal programs. Next slide, please. So now that you all know what your whoops, that you've all got your needs assessment and you have a plan and you think you're going to have great outcomes, now it's time to put the money into the different buckets that are required on the Title I budget page. And this is done in, you kind of get your plan outside of Utah grants, but then you will enter it all in Utah grants. So you have to contact your private LEAs, private schools in your boundaries, and make sure you have all the paperwork on that. And if they want services, then you would do a set aside in the Utah grant system for whatever services you're going to provide to the private schools. And when we say provide services, we do not write checks to them. We cannot give them cash. It's either we'll buy a book or we will provide professional development, or whatever it is that is decided on is what you will do for that private school. Then you can also do a set aside for homeless students, and you will have to see what your LEA needs are, and that's how you determine what you're going to do. And you can set aside for neglected and delinquent students. And you can also do the set aside for parents and family engagement. And these need to be activities where the family comes, you provide a takeaway, all the rules apply. So just make sure it's well noted when you pay for some of these things that it was for parent and family engagement. And remember, if you're over the 500,000, then you have to do the 1% set aside. Next slide, please. So you can set aside 5% or less is recommended for your administrative cost to administer the Title I program in your LEA. And you can also set aside for early learning, which is the pre-K or extended K programs, and foster care, and for the CSI, TSI, comprehensive support and interventions. So next slide, please. And if you guys have any questions, whether you're CSI or TSI, you can always call us, because you will need to know that information when you're in Utah grants. So if you're unsure, give one of us a jingle and we'll help question for you. Then you have district managed initiatives for all subsets of the LEA's Title I schools. So this is where you have extended day learning, before or after school programs, early learning, summer school, and extended time for staff in low achieving schools so that they'll be there to support the students, and supplemental instructions and materials that are needed to help with Title I. And just as a note, the Title I funds can not be used to purchase Tier 1 instrumental materials. It needs to be in addition or different than Tier 1. Next slide, please. Okay, so the use of Title I funds. The use should be to achieve your school goals, to support your goals and objectives that you have lined out that are part of your needs assessment, and that's what your funding should go toward. Support individual student achievement. So you're going to be identifying those students and giving them additional support. And remember that Title I funds are in addition to all your state and local funds. It's above that. And we call it Title I neutral. LEAs need a methodology that they will be Title I neutral. so that if you get Title I funds, that doesn't mean they can take away state or local funds, that the funding has to remain the same, and Title I's on top of that in your Title I schools. Next slide, please. Okay, so use of Title I funds. The comparability report is for LEAs who are funding more than one school. So if you're a single LEA, a charter, you would not need to do the comparability report because you're really only comparing one school, so there's nothing to compare. So only if you have multiple LEAs, like a school district, would you need to complete the comparability. And you can compare your comparability two ways: by student instructional staff ratios, or by the curriculum materials and instructional supplies that you provide students. You get to choose which way you would like to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so allowable uses that are very good and supportive of Title I is professional learning opportunities for teachers. Paras can also be included in that. Supplemental textbooks and supplies, not used in the Tier 1, so it's on top of the Tier 1. Extended day programs, early childhood programs, full day or extended day kindergarten, your parent and family engagement, counseling, accelerated high quality curriculum, and supplemental personnel. So anything that can be used to support the students is basically what you can use your Title I funds on. Next slide, please. So when you start looking at funds, there's so many avenues for these funds. You've got Title I, Title II, Title III. And what they want you to do is, if you're looking at all your funds, you look at like braiding funds. How can we use like several buckets of funds to support your needs assessment, your program, your idea for improvement? And that's what you want to do, is to look at those to make sure that you can get the best outcomes for students. And we will talk about this more later, but just think about all the different funding streams you have and how to kind of put them together to get the most out of your funding and the most outcome. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the risk assessment. That's it's part of the Utah grants application for Title I. And what happens is the LEAs go in and they fill this out and they submit it with their application. And what we're looking for on risk is things that make it look like you may not be successful. So if you fail to submit your assurances by July 1st, then, you know, maybe you're struggling in something and you need some help. So it brings your risk factor up. Failing to complete your annual plan for Title I by November 1st, and failure to complete the DMI by December 1st. So if you're not meeting these deadlines, then your risk factors go up and you could get a nice little, and we don't want them to be punishable or anything, but we just might check in with you to see how you're doing, that if you need any assistance and stuff like that. So just watch out for the things that make you high risk. And the assurances that you do are assuring that you know what the program requires and that you have put into place all the requirements. So for example, if you have your assurances are not submitted by the 10th of November, that means that the Title I funds, which are available in July, you could not access them until your assurances have been approved and that you've done them so if you'd wait till November to do your insurances, then you could not claim funds from July through November. So you want to make sure that you really hit these dates so that you're not penalized, because if you couldn't use funds for 3 months, it might hurt you financially. So make sure that you watch out for that. And the current the last note on here, the last line is reimbursement requests. You always have to use the old funds first. So with Utah grants, where it's only letting you send through one thing at a time and stuff, you really want to stay on top of it and make sure you're requesting your funds quarterly so that you don't get in a positions where you're having to call us and say, we need this approved right now so that we can resubmit some more. So just stay up and do them at least quarterly on your reimbursement request. Next slide, please. Here's some important dates to remember. So the reimbursement request covering the period up to and including June 30th expenses is due by the first week of July for state reporting purposes. So June 30th is the day that we need all that information. And then for the federal reporting, it's expenses through September 30th, because that's when we need to report by October 25th for the federal reporting purposes. So they're just dates to remember so that we hit all our reporting deadlines. Next slide, please. The reimbursement requests are submitted through Utah grants. So once you've completed your application, you can start requesting funds. And we do want them quarterly, and requests must be preceded by both an approved Title I director, basically your LEA plan November 1st, and your desktop monitoring is December 1st. So just dates to remember. And the fourth bullet down is the date that accounting gives us and the LEAs of when they need to submit their reimbursement if they want it to be paid on that month's allotment. So usually it's around the 10th of the month, but sometimes they go a day or two one way or the other, but you can find it by looking at the website, and it's really helpful. And remember to attach a general ledger to your request. And if it's your first request, do a complete submission, include your time and effort, show your receipts, or give a detailed ledger of purchases. It's like when we look at the first reimbursement, we're doing like a desktop monitoring on that. Next slide, please. And that's, oh, so I got ahead of myself. So that's your first reimbursement. We will look for desktop monitoring to make sure you have everything. And if there's a problem with either you don't have the DMI done or something happens, then we do put a hold on the funds. We can't release them until all of those things are completed. DMI, Utah grants, everything needs to be up to speed before you get funds. And if not, we just put a hold on them, and I'll send you a note saying, hey, you got to go in and finish the DMI or whatever it is that's lacking. So if you're looking for funds, you must do all of these things first. And then the monitoring, like we said, the risks go up if you have any of these problems, but most of the time we don't see a lot of problems and we're good, but you need to take care of anything that's outstanding. Next slide, please. Okay, so now time and effort. This is always a hot topic, and USBE is trying to work on a policy so that all of our monitoring people are looking at or requiring the same type of things. But what it is you can either use old guidance, the UGG requirements from the old rules, and put that in your policy, and you can use that. Or you can use the new policies and write your policy and use that. But whichever policy, you can be more restrictive with the old guidance, or you can be less restrictive with the new guidance. But it basically boils down to whatever you put in your time and effort policy. And there's so many different ways to do time and effort, but we're just going to go over a few of these. Next slide, please. So this is a basic outline of the things that you should include in your time and effort. Now, your name, job description, your hours, federal program, whichever program you're using, if you're using multiple programs, or you can do a statement of 100% time and activity, and it does need a signature. So this is basic, and these are things that whether you do, I call it paper to pencil, you know, you manually write it down, or you're using electronic, you would want to see the same information on your submittance as you would see here. So here's an example of a semi-annual certification that it's got your employee's name, the reporting periods and everything. And you're just putting down what funding codes you work on and how long you work on each of those projects every day. So and you're going to work the same schedule for like 6 months or whatever your policy says, and then you will submit your time and effort. Next screen, please. Okay, and this is the monthly personal activity report. So this is something you would fill out every month that says, these are the project I worked on throughout the month, and you sign it, and you've got your division of time and everything's on there. So that would be your report, and then your supervisor would sign it, or whomever is authorized per the policy. Next slide. Okay, and here's a personal activity report, which is reporting exactly the same type of stuff as your distribution of time, and has the same requirements as fields as all the other ones. And then you have a second sheet attached to this one, which says, okay, this is my schedule and this is what I worked for this month, or however long you want it to go for. So that's your PAR example. Next screen, please. So time and effort is evolving. We like electronic time and effort. We like, you can do a PDF document where you have them do the electronic signatures. You can also use, like if somebody applied for a Title I position and their job description says, this person is going to work on Title I the whole school year or whatever time frame, then that can also be used as a time and effort document instead of having to do it like monthly or semi or whatever. But I would caution you that if you do like the job description, sometimes that people get moved into another position, and then you would fail to figure out that you moved them without redoing their job description. So when you have your policy for time and effort, it's going to be approved by USBE. And, you know, like if you're doing electronic, you would send us an electronic example of how they're going to report the time and effort. You're going to put in there that the employee signs into a secured website, enters their time, splits their time out, however they're going to do it. And then at the end of the pay period or whenever, that their supervisor will go into a secured place and also approve that. So there's lots of ways to do time and effort. You can still use the paper and pencil, fill it all out manually, or you can try some of the electronic processes that are out there that I think are so amazing. And if you go to the next slide, you will see like, this should be on one big line, but it's like, you've got the person's name, you've got their job description, where they're located and what they're working on and how many hours they worked on it. This is a real simple one, but this is what you're going to see on an electronic one. And then you don't have to go around and gather signatures because it's all done through your virtually, however you want to all say that. But it's all depends on how you guys want to do your time and effort. And if you have questions, please call us because we want to make it easy on you. Next slide, please. Okay, federal carryover. So we've talked about that a little today, where it's usually only 15%. And with the waiver that I'm sure will be approved. So you could do more this year, but you also have to fill out the letter asking for the waiver so that we can document it and keep track of that. But you won't be penalized this year if you do the waiver, and it's through all the title programs. So make sure everybody knows that in your districts or LEAs. And so, and remember that those carryovers are only every 3 years, except for excluding this year's. I know that's all confusing, but I'm sure we'll get the waiver, and so just reach out to us and we'll let you know when we get the waiver too. So, and be sure to fill out the Qualtrics survey so that we can meet the requirement to apply for the waiver. Next slide, please. Okay, here is your expiration dates for funds. So all federal programs are available for 27 months. In addition, an additional 12 months plus, or an additional 15 months, depending on if your tidings amendments. Fiscal year 2019, the normal date would have been September 30, 20, but the COVID, the feds gave a waiver, and so it's due in 21, September 30 of 21. And the 20 funds also expire on 21. And these are the funds that we're requesting the waiver on. So hopefully they will be extended through September 30th of 22. So it's just important that you remember all these dates. And I know these dates have been moving a lot, but it's a good resource. Print this, put it on the wall so that you know when the funds are going to be expiring. So, and it's always 1 year after the funds. So if it's 21 funds, then it will expire September of 22. 22 funds expires September of 23. Is there any questions out there?
Yes, Tammy, we have some questions. So let's see. First of all, Denisa is asking about comparability, and she says, when completing the comparability forms A and B, just to confirm, do they also need to complete C and D, or D and E, not just C or D or E? Is that correct?
Yeah, so you have to do like the first 2 pages, and then depending on which way you're going to go, what comparability you want to do. You want to do C and D, or if you're doing the supplies, I think it was the last one. I can't remember for sure which one, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me. But yeah, you don't have to do all of the 5 pages. You just have to pick which way you want to compare.
Okay, and Tamila's question is, could you give us some examples of the electronic time and effort? Are there examples posted on USBE website?
I don't think I have an electronic one on the website, but I will write that down and do that.
Okay, and
one I had in my presentation.
And Stephanie says, we're looking for a simpler method for our district with time and effort. We're still on the monthly, quarterly signatures, and it is cumbersome. So again, she wants more examples that are examples of simplified processes that other LEAs might be using for time and efforts, because she'd like to work on a new process for her district.
Okay, and we can get you examples. It would be help to know if they're going to stay paper to pencil or if they've gone to an electronic system or not. So if she wants to call me, then we can talk about how to make it simpler.
Okay, thank you. Lori's question is, what specific information would the LEA need to include in their LEA time and effort policy?
The specific information is like how often that you're going to gather the information, what type of system you're using, whether you're using an electronic or the pencil to paper, Or maybe you were going to do the PDF where you would send it out and they could electronically sign, and who you want to be an approver of time and effort, like in your LEA is the Title I person, the principal, kind of your policy of who's responsible for what to make sure everything gets done, how often it's going to be reported, those types of things.
Okay. And then Val put some examples of the comparability. So option 1, Title I schools must have equal or lower student to instructional staff ratios and an equal or higher instructional supplies and curriculum materials allocation per pupil. So that would be complete forms A, B, C, and D. Or option 2, the Title I schools must have equal or higher per pupil expenditures than the corresponding averages for non-Title I schools. So you would complete forms A, B, D, and E.
Yeah.
And Becky Peters.
Questions, call us.
Okay, Becky Peters put a website link there in the chat box, and we can certainly work to add additional information there as Tammy has it. So those were the questions, Tammy.
Okay. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Becky.
Thank you. So can't get my camera. There we go. I want to thank everybody for being here again today. I know some of you, especially those of you that are new to this role, you're going to have questions, right? That's just to be expected. Title I is a complex program. It has lots of parts and requirements and provisions that are in the law, and it can be confusing. But we are always here. And as Val said, our goal as a team is to get back to you as quickly as we possibly can. So if you call us and we're unable to pick up the phone right then because maybe we're in a meeting or we've stepped away from our desk, we have a voice over internet phone system. So if you leave us a voicemail, it goes into our email. And so as soon as I'm back at my desk, I can click that email message, listen to the message, and call you right back or send you an email with additional information or document that you might need. So we all strive really hard to respond as quickly as we possibly can to phone calls and emails. We're also happy to, jump on a Teams meeting call with you or a Zoom meeting. We're always available. And if you're new and you really need someone to sit down side by side and help you through some things, if you'll email me and, we can look at schedules that work for you and work for us, we can come out on, to your LEA site and sit down with you and, spend as much time as you need, just talking through things and helping you, looking at Utah grants, all of that kind of thing. We are more than happy to do any of those things. So before we wrap up, Dr. Estrada has a couple of announcements that she would like to make. So I'm going to turn some time over to Christelle.
Hi, everybody. This is just brief, and I want to thank Becky as well as Val and Tammy and Leslie for the work that they're doing in relationship to supporting students who come from communities and families that are economically disadvantaged. And just so you all know, Title III accountability for multilingual learners and annual growth goals is actually a part of Title I accountability. So the whole point of braiding funds in relationship to student outcomes, I think, is a really important way to think about how you effectively use resources to ensure student growth. So the first announcement is the Springville Museum did this amazing exhibition called Up Close and Far Away. And the question for students, kindergarten all the way up to seniors, was express your feelings and describe the way in which you're using art to experience the COVID pandemic. And they put it online. And so because we have such an amazing, talented group of people, Jeff Ojeda composed original music to kindergarten through 6th grade, and then middle school special composition, and then high school special composition. And then Alex Farrar in our IT department put it together in an amazing video musical composition where you can read what the kids have written and also see their visual expressions of that. We put it together and worked with Springville Museum, and there's going to be a premiere of that, as well as a wonderful reception. And I'll actually send you the information included with the Title III announcement for our meeting, September 8th at 6 o'clock at Springville Museum. So I really encourage you to come. They will also reopen the actual exhibition from September 8th until December 11th. So you might get a chance, if you come, to meet the students, which would be really wonderful. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement is our Title III ALS Directors Meeting, which includes, all the Title I people, as well as teachers, principals, administrators, very open, is going to be on Thursday, August 26th on Zoom. And I'll also send it out to the Title I directors. And it'll be 9 o'clock till 12:30. And the reason you will find this really interesting, I think, is Aaron Wilson from Granite, with his data and assessment person, is actually going to do a presentation to better understand how annual growth goals are calculated for movement toward proficiency, since every single student learning English actually has an individual growth goal in the accountability system. And of course, the students we work with, learning English is, they're learning English, but oftentimes the students that we work with know 10 or 11 or 12 other languages, right? So that's why this idea of asset-based multilingual learners. So Aaron Wilson, Megan Lopez will help you support in relationship to the WIDA assessments. We're going to have an opportunity to actually hear a really interesting analyst from the International Rescue Committee who's doing an overview of possible legislation related to translation services and how you would evaluate their effectiveness, especially when families, it's a civil rights law that says families who are multilingual learners the parents must have access to all the information that English-only parents have in a language they understand, right? That's a civil right. So we'll have that. And then Leslie will also meet again with this to be very specific about the TSI criteria, as well as opportunities for call related to school improvement. Then we always have promising practices, because my whole theory is you don't have to go out of Utah to see not only amazing instruction, but innovative approaches. So we'll have some of our colleagues, even a teacher from East High, who did a really innovative program with content-specific grade level chemistry work in a summer bridge program. So we'll have an opportunity to really see how resources are allocated in relationship to summer bridge programs that are often pre-AP, as well as extensive in relationship to mitigating kind of the implications of COVID. So I'll send out an agenda specifically so you'll see the people and kind of the topics for conversation. The other thing is I'm going to send out the annual assessment, which is a document where you actually input evidence, and we've been doing this for 4 years, and it's a requirement for Title III. It's uploaded into the grant system, and then the all fillable PDFs And then I've been meeting individually with new ALS directors to really support them because it's challenging. The point is, yes, you should know the law for lots of reasons, and Ogden actually sends this to all the principals so it's a source of their education to understand federal law related to Title III. But more importantly, you actually have the electronic evidence if you end up randomly getting selected for a federal audit on Title III. And that's one of the reasons we do this. It's about education and support. The monitoring, I'll tell you, is very different. It's not on a regular schedule. You can go to the Title III website and see, but I meet with individual people so that we can identify, based on the data, where the gaps are for TSI schools, as well as promising practices and commendations for teaching that they would like to upscale and have more leverage to do that. So it's a different way of thinking about how monitoring is really focused on better creating a community of learners across LEAs who have multiple schools. So I just want to thank you again, and thanks to my absolutely best colleagues in the world. So Becky Donaldson, Val, Tammy, and the other people connected to federal programs who are kind, generous, open-hearted. And again, no question is irrelevant. You should always, always feel comfortable leaving a phone message, which Becky says it's very easy. It comes in our emails, or, sending us an email with details, and then we'll set up a Zoom meeting, or I'll come and visit you in your office. So that's all I have for Title III. So thank you, Becky. Dr. Donaldson.
Thank you, Christelle. Val posted the link to the Up Close and Far Away exhibit. Jeff Ojeda's not here with us this morning, but he's an incredible musician, composer, and performer, and we just have such a great colleagues that we work with. So it's just an absolute privilege for me to associate with these wonderful colleagues that you met here today. It's just, I love each one of them. They're talented, knowledgeable, they're dedicated, and they work tirelessly to support, programs that are supporting our students and our educators and our families across the state. So it's really a privilege to be able to do that. So as I said, anytime you need help, please reach out to us. Call us, email us. We're here, we're ready to help. Here's our contact information. On our next meeting will be on September 29th, our next Title I directors meeting. And one of the things that we're going to do at that meeting is our wonderful colleague, Aaron Bruff, who's the coordinator of our data and statistics team at USBE, recently did a study. He worked with Christelle, and they looked at, it's a longitudinal study that they looked at across all the student groups and looked at, what progress we're making and where are their gaps. And so Aaron has agreed to come and present that to the Title I directors on that day. So we're really looking forward to working with Aaron. As soon as we get the link from the recording of our meeting today, we will send that out. And then those links are always also posted on our Title I web pages. And Becky Peters also posts any materials that we use during the meetings so that you can go back and find those. And again, I want to thank each of you for being here today, for being generous with your time and energy. We know it's an extremely busy time of the year. So thank you. Christelle?
Sorry, I just have one more announcement. When you talked about the data, at the Title III meeting, I'm working this afternoon. I've done the analysis with Kristen Campbell and Aaron Bruff, and we've identified the LEAs and the schools that have awarded biliteracy seals. This year, schools have awarded over 1,000 biliteracy seals. So we're going to do recognitions on the Title III meeting, and then Aaron and I are working on comparing the WIDA scores in relationship to annual growth goals and the summer programs connected to mitigating COVID. So we're trying to do those recognition awards because, we all need, to look at exemplary practices that make a difference for our students. So I just want to kind of end on that note and, say that recognition is really important.
Thank you, Christelle. So we're going to give you back a few minutes of your day, but if you would just turn your camera on for a second, if you're able to, and just let's just wave as we look at everybody in our little Brady Bunch squares here. And it's so fun to see. And like I said, we'd love to see you in person. We hope this worked for you and saved you some time out of your day for, traveling, and also keeps everyone safe from being packed into a conference room with people from across the state. So we wish you a wonderful beginning of a new school year. We know it's so busy. And as I said, we are just a call or email away, and we're here to help you in any possible way that we can. And we're so grateful for everything that you do. We have the best Title I directors in the nation. I will say that hands down, absolutely the best. And anytime we bring in national presenters and they come to Utah and they say, wow, your educators in the state of Utah are so incredible. They're kind and they're thoughtful and they're concerned about their students and they work so hard. It's just such a privilege. I mean, and they say we go to other places and it's not like that. It's our Utah educators are just absolutely the most incredible, passionate, dedicated group of individuals there could ever be. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We're happy to be the wind beneath your wings and do anything we can to help you. So have a wonderful rest of your day. We're giving you back 21 minutes. And I know you need that time desperately. We'll stay on for a few minutes if some of you need to ask, specific questions that are particular to your LEA. We're happy to be here for a few